$39,000. That's how much the government will require a man named Dale to pull out of his own retirement account the year he turns 73. Not suggest, require. Whether he needs the money that year or not. His neighbor Marilyn started with the same amount in the same kind of account, on the same day, at the same age. Her required withdrawal that year is $15,000. Same money, same rules. And nobody is going to explain to Dale why his number is nearly 3 times hers. Here's why this happens to careful people. Every piece of advice Dale ever received told him the same thing. Don't touch the retirement account. Leave it alone. Let it grow. Spend your savings first, and don't take money out of a tax-deferred account until you absolutely have to. And for 40 years, that advice was correct. While you're working, every dollar you pull out of that account lands on top of a salary and gets taxed at the highest rate you pay. Leaving it alone was the right answer for 4 decades. Then you retire, and the salary stops, and the advice doesn't update. Nobody sends a correction. The rule that protected Dale for 40 years quietly becomes the rule that costs him, and it happens silently, because nothing visibly goes wrong for 11 years. There are 3 ways to take money out of a retirement account, and almost everyone picks the one they were told to. Today, we're going to follow 3 people who each pick a different one, from the day they stop working to the day they turn 90, and watch exactly where the paths separate. One thing before we start. I'm not your advisor, and I don't know your bracket, your state, or your situation. What follows is how the mechanism works, not what you should do. Every number here comes from a model with assumptions I'll state out loud as we go, and they're all listed in the description so you can check them. Meet the 3. Dale is 62. He just stopped working. He has a taxable brokerage account, a traditional retirement account with $550,000 in it, and a smaller Roth. Dale does exactly what he was told. He spends the brokerage account first, leaves the retirement account completely untouched, and claims his Social Security right away at 62, so he doesn't have to sell anything. Dale is not being lazy. Dale is following the most widely repeated piece of retirement advice there is. Marilyn is also 62, with the same accounts and the same $550,000. Marilyn does something that feels wrong. She deliberately pulls $40,000 a year out of the traditional retirement account, the taxed one, starting immediately, on purpose, in the years when she doesn't have to. Everyone who loves her thinks she's making a mistake. And Gordon is 62 too. Same accounts, same balance. Gordon has heard that the Roth is the tax-free one, so Gordon does the thing that feels smartest of all. He spends the Roth first. Free money, no tax bill, and the traditional account stays untouched and growing. Gordon feels like he's found something clever. Here are the assumptions, said out loud, so you can argue with them. All 3 start with $550,000 in the traditional account at 62. Everything grows at 6% a year. The required withdrawals later use the government's own published life expectancy divisors. Those aren't my numbers, they're the table everybody uses. And Marilyn takes out $40,000 a year, every year, from 62 to 72. Change any of those and the size of the effect changes. What doesn't change is the direction, and the direction is the whole point. Let's start the clock. Before we watch this go wrong for 2 of them, I want to defend the conventional advice properly because it is not stupid, and the people who gave it to Dale were not fools. The standard order is, spend your taxable brokerage account first, then your traditional retirement account, then your Roth last. And there are 3 genuinely good reasons for it. 1. Money inside the retirement accounts grows without being taxed along the way, so the longer it stays inside, the more of that compounding you keep. 2. Money in a taxable brokerage account has often already been taxed once, so pulling from it can cost you very little today. 3. The Roth is the most valuable dollar you own because it comes out clean, so you save it for last, and if you never spend it, It goes to your children in the best possible shape. Every one of those points is true. Read that again, because I'm not about to tell you the conventional order is wrong. What I'm going to show you is that the conventional order was designed to answer one question: which account is cheapest to spend from today? And it never asks the second question. Not which account, which decade. Because the tax you pay on a retirement account isn't set by which account you touch. It's set by how much income lands in the same year. And the single biggest driver of that, for most retirees, isn't what they choose at all. Here's the thing almost nobody says out loud. For most people, the years between the day the paycheck stops and the day the government starts forcing withdrawals are the lowest income years of their entire adult life. Think about what's true in that window. The salary's gone. If you've delayed Social Security, that hasn't started either. The required withdrawals don't begin until 73. For someone who retires at 62, that's 11 years where your taxable income can be genuinely unusually low. 11 years. And here's the part that matters. That window closes on its own, and it never reopens. Dale spends those 11 years doing exactly what he was told, living off the brokerage account, leaving the retirement account alone. From his side, nothing is going wrong. Nothing feels like a mistake. His statements look great. The retirement account is the best performing thing he owns, precisely because he isn't touching it. Marilyn spends those same 11 years deliberately draining the account everyone told her to protect. Let's check in on all three. At 65, all three hit Medicare. Nothing dramatic has happened to any of them yet. Dale's untouched retirement account has been compounding for 3 years and looks better than ever. Gordon has burned through a chunk of his Roth and feels fine, because he hasn't paid a cent of tax on any of it. Marilyn's traditional account is visibly smaller than the other two, and she has had at least one conversation with a family member who thinks she's being reckless. If you stop the video here, Marilyn looks like the one making the mistake. Hold that thought. At 67, all three reach what the system calls full retirement age for Social Security. Dale has been collecting since 62. Gordon too. Marilyn hasn't claimed it all yet. She's still waiting, and she's still pulling $40,000 a year out of the retirement account to live on. Her account is now noticeably below the other two. Dale's and Gordon's are both up. Now let's talk about something that has been quietly happening this whole time, that none of them can see on a statement. Part of your Social Security can be taxable, and how much of it depends on your other income in that same year. Not on how much Social Security you get, on what else is landing on the return with it. Which means that later, when a large forced withdrawal shows up in the same tax year as a full year of Social Security, it doesn't just get taxed itself. It can drag a larger portion of the Social Security into being taxable too. One withdrawal, two effects. I'm not going to give you the thresholds because they change, and I'd rather you look up the current ones than trust a number from a video. What I want you to hold on to is the shape of it. Income in retirement doesn't arrive in separate boxes. It stacks. And the thing that lands last is the thing that pushes everything else up. And there's a second stack happening at the same time, in the account Dale was told to spend first. When Dale sells investments out of his brokerage account, he isn't taxed on the whole amount, only on the growth. That's genuinely favorable, and it's part of why the conventional advice points there first. But that growth is generally taxed at rates that depend on your total income for the year, which means it's not a fixed cost either. It's another thing that gets more expensive when something large lands in the same year. So watch what's actually being set up here. In his 60s, Dale's brokerage sales are cheap because his income is low. In his 70s, when the forced withdrawals arrive, everything in his return gets more expensive at once. The withdrawal itself, a larger share of his Social Security, the treatment of anything he sells, and his healthcare premium 2 years behind. Nothing in that list is a penalty. Every single one of them is just a rate that responds to total income. Dale spent 11 years arranging for all of them to peak in the same decade, and every step of the way, he was following the advice he was given. Dale doesn't know this yet, because for now his income is low and his Social Security is barely affected. The stacking hasn't started. It starts at 73, and it starts all at once. At 70, Marilyn finally claims her Social Security. Because she waited, her monthly benefit is permanently, meaningfully larger than the one Dale locked in at 62. And that larger amount is what a surviving spouse would inherit, if it came to that. She has now been pulling from the traditional account for 8 straight years. Dale and Gordon have not touched theirs at all. And here's where it gets expensive. But not yet. Because the number that decides all of this arrives in 3 years, and it isn't chosen by any of them. Before we get there, I want to flag something that will land 2 full years after the moment we're about to reach. A cost that shows up when the decision that caused it has completely faded from memory. It's the most avoidable item in this entire video, and almost nobody connects the 2 events. We'll get to it right after. First, the number that sets everything else. At 72, here is where the traditional retirement accounts stand. Dale, $985,000. 10 years of untouched compounding turned $550,000 into nearly $1 million. Gordon, $985,000. Identical. He never touched it either. Marilyn, $386,000. Look at those 3 numbers. If money in an account were the only thing that mattered, this video would be over and Marilyn would have lost badly. Dale is nearly $600,000 ahead of her. This is the exact moment where most people close the tab, and it's the moment before everything reverses. At 73, all 3 of them stop being in charge. The government requires you to begin taking money out of a traditional retirement account, whether you need it or not. It's called a required minimum distribution, and the amount isn't your choice. You take the balance and divide it by a number from a published table based on your age. That's it. That's the whole calculation. Which means the size of your forced income is decided entirely by how big you let the account get. Dale spent 11 years making that account as large as possible. He did that on purpose. He was proud of it. Dale's required withdrawal at 73, $39,399. Gordon's, identical, $39,399. Marilyn's, $15,444. And that forced income doesn't arrive alone. It lands on top of a full year of Social Security, on top of any other income in a single tax year every year for the rest of their lives. Here's the part that breaks people's brains. Dale never made a decision to take out $39,000. He never sat down and chose it. He made a decision at 62 to leave the account alone, and that decision quietly wrote every one of these numbers for him, a decade in advance. Marilyn made the opposite decision in the same year, and hers came out to 15. 2 years in, and the divisor gets smaller every year as you age, so the required percentage climbs. Dale is now being forced to take $44,000. Marilyn, $17,000. Notice what's happening. The gap isn't closing. It's widening, and it widens automatically every single year, without either of them doing anything. At 80, Dale's required withdrawal is $57,000. Marilyn's is $22,000. Dale is now in his 80s, taking nearly $60,000 a year of fully taxable income out of an account he never wanted to touch, because a formula decided it. While his living expenses have almost certainly gone down, not up. He's being paid money he did not ask for and taxed on it. And this is the cost I told you about, the one that lands 2 years late. Your Medicare premiums aren't a flat price for everyone. Above certain income levels, an additional amount gets added on top, and the income they use to decide it comes from your tax return from 2 years earlier. So Dale's forced withdrawal at 73 doesn't just get taxed in the year it happens. It sets his healthcare premium at 75. And when the letter arrives at 75 telling him his premium has gone up, there is nothing in that letter connecting it to a withdrawal he was forced to take 2 years ago on an account he was told to protect, on advice he was given at 62. 3 separate events, 1 cause, and no line of sight between any of them. Marilyn's forced withdrawals are small enough that this pressure is far weaker for her. Not because she's clever, but because there's simply less being pushed out. And notice what she actually bought. She didn't buy a bigger balance. She bought control over when her income arrives. Dale and Gordon handed that decision to a formula. Now, there's a version of what Marilyn did that I've deliberately left out until now, because it changes the shape of the ending. Marilyn spent the money she pulled out of the traditional account. She needed it to live on, so it came out, got taxed, and paid for groceries and a roof. But there's another way to empty that account in the low window, and it's the one people with other savings use. Instead of spending it, you move it out of the traditional account into a Roth. You pay the tax in the year you move it, and from that moment on, the money is out of the forced withdrawal system permanently. It never generates a required distribution again. It never adds to the income that decides your Medicare premium. It never drags more of your Social Security into being taxable. It's called a conversion, and the low window is the only cheap time to do one, precisely because your income is low. Now, I want to be careful here, because conversions are the single most oversold idea in retirement content right now, and there's a reason for that. They make for a great pitch. So here's the honest frame. A conversion is not free money, and it is not always a good idea. You're volunteering to pay tax now, in exchange for not paying it later. That only works if the rate you pay now is lower than the rate you'd have paid later. And if you're wrong about that, you've simply paid early for nothing. It's a bet on your own future income, and on a tax system nobody can predict. It also has consequences that arrive on a delay. A large conversion raises your income in the year you do it, which means it can raise your Medicare premium 2 years later. The same mechanism we just watched happen to Dale, except this time you did it to yourself on purpose. This is exactly the kind of decision to take to somebody licensed, with your actual numbers, rather than to a video. What I want you to leave with isn't do a conversion. It's that the low window is the only period where the option is cheap, and that it closes on its own at 73 whether you used it or not. There's one more consequence of Dale's decision, and it lands after he's gone. When a traditional retirement account passes to most adult children, they generally can't stretch the withdrawals across their own lifetimes anymore. Under current rules, most non-spouse beneficiaries have to empty the account within 10 years. 10 years. And here's who's receiving it. A son or daughter who is very likely in their peak earning years. 50s, highest salary of their life, highest rate they will ever pay. So Dale spends 11 years carefully growing an account, and then it lands on his children as fully taxable income, compressed into a decade, stacked on top of the biggest paychecks they'll ever earn. The account that felt like the safest thing he owned arrives at the worst possible moment in their tax lives. Marilyn's account is smaller when it passes, but a larger share of what she leaves is in the Roth, which passes to her children without adding a dollar to their taxable income. They still have to empty it within 10 years, but emptying it costs them nothing. Same intention from both of them. Leave something behind. Very different amounts actually arriving. And notice the pattern, because it's the same one as everything else in this video. Nobody at any point sends a letter explaining that the account you're protecting will be taxed hardest at the exact moment it changes hands. At 85, Dale is forced to take $73,000. Marilyn, $29,000. At 90, Dale, $89,000. Marilyn, $35,000. And here is the whole video in one line. Add up every forced withdrawal from 73 to 90. Dale, $1,134,000 of income he did not choose to take. Marilyn, $444,000, a difference of $690,000 in how much income gets pushed out of them. From two people who started with the same account, on the same day, at the same age. Now let's deal with Gordon, because his mistake is different, and it's the one I see people make while feeling clever. Gordon spent the Roth first. Every dollar came out tax-free, and for 11 years he paid almost nothing. On paper, he had the smoothest decade of the three. But look where he is at 73. His forced withdrawal is identical to Dale's. 39,000, then 44, then 57, because he protected the same account Dale protected. He gets all of Dale's problem, and he has no Roth left. That matters more than it sounds. The Roth is the one account you can draw from without adding to the income that decides everything else. The taxation of your Social Security, your Medicare premium, all of it. It's not just a tax-free account. It's the only lever you have in a year when something goes wrong and you need money without consequences. Gordon spent his lever in his 60s to save a little tax and arrives in his 70s with the largest forced income of the three and nothing to soften it. He didn't get the order slightly wrong. He got it exactly backwards. Let me show you the ugly version because none of this happens in a straight line. Imagine the market falls hard in the year Dale turns 74. His account drops. But the required withdrawal for that year was calculated off the previous year-end balance. So he's forced to sell into a down market to satisfy a number set when things were fine. Selling low, on demand, by law. Or imagine something worse. One of a married couple dies at 78. The survivor's Social Security drops to a single benefit. The household income falls, but the required withdrawals don't fall, and the survivor now files a return alone, which for the same income generally means less favorable treatment than filing jointly did. Less income, same forced withdrawals, worse filing status, all at the same time, in the worst year of someone's life. This is the scenario that makes the whole thing real, and it's the one nobody plans for, because nobody wants to sit at a kitchen table and model their spouse dying. Marilyn's smaller forced withdrawals are a cushion in exactly that year. She didn't buy them for that reason. She got them anyway. Now let me be just as honest about the other side, because I'm not here to tell you to go empty your retirement account. There are people for whom Dale's order is genuinely right, and here's how to tell if you're one of them. If your income in retirement is going to be higher than it was while you were working, a large pension, significant rental income, a business that keeps paying, then the low-income window I've been describing doesn't exist for you. There's nothing to fill. Pulling money out early just means paying at the same rate, or worse, earlier. If your traditional account is modest, the forced withdrawals will be modest too. And this whole problem is a rounding error. Dale's issue is a problem of having saved a lot. That's a real thing, but it isn't everyone's thing. If you're going to leave the account to charity, the calculation changes again entirely. And if you retire at 68 rather than 62, your window isn't 11 years. It's 5. The strategy doesn't disappear, but it has far less room to work. Marilyn didn't win because she's smarter than Dale. She won because she happened to have the profile where this matters. A big tax-deferred balance, a long low-income window, and no other income filling it. Take away any one of those, and her advantage shrinks or vanishes. That's why this video can't tell you a number. It can only tell you which question to ask. So which of these three are you actually? You might be Dale if you have a large traditional retirement account. You retired before your Social Security started, and you're proud of not touching it. Dale isn't careless. Dale is disciplined. His discipline is pointed at the wrong decade. You might be Gordon if you look at your Roth and see the cheapest money to spend. It is the cheapest money to spend today. It's also the only money that doesn't count against you later, which makes it the most expensive thing you own to waste. You might be Marilyn if you're willing to do something that looks wrong for 10 years. Pay tax you didn't have to pay yet. Watch a balance go down on purpose and explain to your family why. In exchange for controlling when your income arrives rather than being told. Most people never choose. They default into Dale because Dale's path is the one that requires no decision at all. So here's what to actually do this week. And it takes about 20 minutes. Find the current balance of every traditional retirement account you have. Add them up. Then work out how many years there are between the year you stop working, or the year you stopped, and the year you turn 73. Write both numbers on the same piece of paper. That's it. That's the whole exercise. A balance and a number of years. Those two figures together tell you whether any of this applies to you, and roughly how much room you have. If the balance is large and the window is long, you have something worth taking to a professional. And now, you know the exact question to ask, which is the part most people can't do. If the balance is modest or the window is short, you can stop thinking about it and go enjoy your retirement. $39,000. That's where we started. What Dale is required to take out at 73 and every year after, growing, because of a decision he made at 62 that never felt like a decision at all. He didn't get bad advice. He got advice that was right for 40 years and stopped being right on a specific Tuesday, and nobody sent the update. These aren't loopholes. They aren't tricks. They're just arithmetic. A balance, divided by a number from a table. The only question is, who decides what that balance is? For 11 years, it's you. Take care of yourselves, and take care of your money.